All right, welcome to the start of a new week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, website right below, Panther-Lair.com. Don't click that, that's an image, but just follow those letters right along there from your left to your right. Type them into your search bar. Go to Panther-Lair.com for the best coverage of the Pitt sports, really. Football, basketball, recruiting. We got some wrestling coverage. Covered all at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. And you, of course, can hang out with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. We're looking for Pitt conversation, Pitt interaction, discussion with other Pitt fans. It's the best place to do it. Best online collection of Pitt fans I think that you're going to find. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So go check that out. And of course, we do our videos, our little video thing right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Lots of exclusive Pitt video content. We got our live streams that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30. It's usually every Wednesday night at 8:30. This week, I think we might switch things up a little bit. Pitt, of course, playing at Duke on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. That's going to interfere. We're not going to do a live show at 8:30 during the final 10 minutes of that game. So we're going to push it back and actually do a live post-game show. I keep talking about how we might work some post-game basketball, some basketball post-game shows in like we did with the football program all season. We're going to do it on basketball, and we're going to start it right here on Wednesday night. So we're going to watch the Duke game and Pitt at Duke, 7 o'clock tip-off. And when that thing ends, we are going to go live for, let me just double check and make sure that's, Wednesday the 11th. For some reason, I started to have a quick bout of paranoia that the game was not actually on Wednesday. It is on Wednesday, and we'll be live after the game to talk about what we saw there and everything else going on in the world of Pitt sports. So you have that to look forward to. But you might be thinking to yourself, wait, you're going to have a live show on Wednesday night? How am I going to remember that that's happening? You're going to go live after the Duke game. I might forget that. Simple solution. Click that little subscribe button right down there. Turn on your notifications, and you'll get an alert sent to your phone when we go live. You won't miss the live post-game show if you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and click subscribe. Of course, you also find out when we post a new Morning Pitt video every day, Monday through Friday, or any of our post-conference video, or post-game press conference videos, or any of the other things we do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you subscribe and also like this video too. I think that would go a long way, and we would certainly appreciate it. We start the new week here. Of course, the most recent memory, the fresh memory, is Pitt's loss to Clemson on Saturday, a 75-74 defeat. And, I spent a lot of time talking about how the Pitt-Virginia game, 68-65 game, was actually a 6-point win. They hit a 3 at the end. They kind of made it closer than it would have been. It should have been a 6-point game. It ended up being a 3-point win. Well, you could kind of say the same thing about Saturday's game. It ends up going down as a 1-point loss, 75-74, but that was with a 3-pointer right at the very end. Who hit that? Nike Sabandi, I think. I had it written down. I've already turned the page. Literally in my notebook. You see, this is the end of the Clemson game. Right down here it says end of game. And that's Nike Sabandi hitting a 3 with like 0.9 seconds left. They gave him an extra 0.2. It's actually 1.1. But we turn the page to this week. Literally, figuratively, we're going to keep talking about this just for a little bit. It goes down as a 1-point loss. Ultimately, they lost by 4. But reality is, it was a game that was there for Pitt to win. I think when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, and we'll talk about this game sort of, in the hyper-specific and also in the big picture. The small picture and the big picture, the micro and the macro, however you want to look at it. It was a game that was there for Pitt to win. They're up by 8 with 5.5 minutes to go. They're up by 7 with 4:23 to play. They have the game. That's your opportunity to win. And I keep coming back to that point right there. 67-59 with 5.5 minutes to go. Jamarius Burton hits 2 free throws to set it at an 8-point advantage. And they can't hold. They blow it over the final 5.5 minutes. 16-7 advantage. They get outscored by Clemson to lose it. And there's a lot of reasons why that happened. There's a lot that goes into that. On the most simple, basic level, Clemson shot 6 of 9 over the final 5.5 minutes, and Pitt shot 3 of 8. I mean, if you really want to boil it down to anything sort of very easy to digest, very easy to understand, it's that. They went cold on offense. Too many empty possessions. Not enough points. Not enough baskets. They made 3 baskets over that final 5 minutes. And really, I mean, you could, once we start stretching it back into the rest of the game, I think they made 5 field goals in the last 10 minutes. They only made 5 2-point baskets in the first half. They only made 7 2-point baskets in the second half. And the first half in particular, they made 5 2-point baskets in the first half. And they got 1, 2, 3 of them in the final 3 minutes. 4 of them, actually, in the final 3 minutes. 2-point field goals. I mean, you talk about when a game is lost, and it was ultimately lost. I think Pitt lost this game in the final 5.5 minutes. But look at that, where for the first 17 minutes of the game, Pitt had 1 made field goal inside the arc. I mean, a game is lost there as well, despite the fact that, they went down by 10, 27-17, and battled all the way back to take a 2-point lead into halftime. So despite the fact that they engineered a pretty incredible comeback in the first half heading into the break, they still did so while getting very little inside the arc. And we know this is a team that loves to shoot outside. That this is a 3-point shooting team. They love to fire up the threes, that they're going to live and die by the three. It's going to win them a lot of games. And when they go cold, it's going to lose them a lot of games. But they still need to be able to score inside, not necessarily in the post or in the paint or right under the basket, but the Jamarius Burton pull-up jumpers, the Blake Hinson pull-up jumpers, the Nelly Cummings drives, the Nike Sabandi drives. I mean, all of these things need to happen. The Federico offensive rebounds and putbacks, these things are key to this offense and this team. And it's a big part of the success that they've had. It's not just the 3-point shooting. It's that they can attack you in a lot of ways. That they're very versatile in how they can attack. They can't necessarily... I mean, right now, the only thing Pitt really can't do reliably well offensively, or at least that it hasn't been able to do reliably well offensively through the first 15 games, is score, sort of run the offense through the center, which I think is a product of having Federico or Guillermo Diaz-Graham as opposed to John Hughley out there. If John Hughley's out there, you can run the offense through him a little bit more, play inside out, and do a lot of those fun things we used to see Pitt teams do, 17 years ago, 15 years ago. And they can't really do that right now. That's not really a weapon that's available to them, but they can kind of do everything else. I mean, they can run, pick and roll. They can shoot from outside. They can I think they can drive. They can do a lot offensively, but they sort of either limited themselves or Clemson's defense limited them in the first half of this game. And so it's a game that was ultimately lost in the final 5.5 minutes. It was a game that was lost in the final 10 minutes. And it was a game that was lost in the first 20 minutes. It was, and that's without even bringing up, 6 missed free throws, although Clemson missed 6 as well. There's a lot of ways you lose a 1-point game or even a 4-point game. And there's a lot of situations where you lose them. This particular game, you can narrow it down to those final 5.5 minutes and say the offense went cold. But the reality is the offense wasn't reliable enough throughout the game, and they still ended up scoring 74 points. I think Chris Carter from the Post-Gazette pointed out this was Pitt's lowest shooting percentage of the season. They still score 74 points. And so an off night for the offense, but still a performance that was darn near close enough to win. And it's funny coming out of this game. We'll talk more of the specifics in the game, players, this and that in a minute. But it's funny coming out of this game, seeing some of the reaction. I think by and large, the Pitt fan base has been pretty measured in its response to this loss. It's been pretty measured in its because as I'm watching this and as the game ends, I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm not really paying attention to what people are saying on social media or the message boards. I kind of check in on it later after an hour or two, once I've got a few things posted on the site. But I'm sort of sitting there, and I'm sitting there writing, and I'm sort of imagining that people are losing their minds. They're going to want to fire Jeff Capel, saying the collapse begins now. But I was sort of pleasantly surprised with how the Pitt fan base responded to this, because I wasn't sure if they really actually remembered what it's like to have a game like this. Not a loss. They're very well acquainted with what it's like to watch Pitt lose games. That's nothing new. There's a lot of familiarity there. But rather what it's like to watch a meaningful basketball game. And yeah, it's still early January. I mean, we're still, today's January 9th. We're just starting the second week of January. And there's a long time to go. There's 15 regular season basketball games left on this schedule. There's a lot of time for things to go up or things to go down or what have you. But at this point, this was a meaningful basketball game. This was an important basketball game, a game that I think the rest of the conference was keeping an eye on. I think a game that a lot of national observers were keeping an eye on, and a game that 10,403 people were keeping an eye on because that's how many that was the announced attendance at the Peterson Event Center on Saturday. And I believe it. I think that was a pretty accurate number because the place was as full as I've seen it for any game outside of like West Virginia. It was a great crowd. It was a crowd with a lot of energy. The Oakland Zoo had a lot of energy. It was great. It was the way that building was supposed to be. It's the way that building used to be. And it was fun to see it again. Because it was a meaningful game. And everyone got that. And everyone understood it. And I don't think it was just us, in Pittsburgh building that game up to be something. Oh, it's first place in the ACC. Two of the better teams in the conference in the early going battling. Brad Brownell, Clemson coach, talking after the game, coaches are always positive and complimentary of their opponents. They always talk up the guys that they face. Oh, that's a very good team over there. That's a very good team. There was a lot of sincerity in what he was talking about when he said, this is a big win for us. This is a big win for us. When was the last time somebody said was a big win for us? Unless it was like St. Francis, PA, or the Citadel. You know what I mean? Like, when was the last time an ACC team said, this was a big win for us when they beat Pitt? It's been a long time. But I think Brad Brownell sees something in this Pitt team, something that a lot of us have been seeing in this Pitt team, and maybe have been wondering if it's real with this Pitt team. Well, I think he's convinced. I think he's convinced that this is a good Pitt team, that it's a dangerous team to play against. A lot of it due to that man right there, Jamarius Burton. But I think he's convinced about how good this Pitt team just might be. I think Jeff Capel believes in how good this Pitt team might be. And I was wondering how people would respond to some of Jeff Capel's comments after the game. He talked about, it was really cool to be a part of a game like this. And I wondered if people would respond and say, geez, Capel, who cares? You lost. Why would you say it's cool to be a part of a game like this? But I think he's right. And I think some Pitt fans who have been around since the mid-2000s probably agree with him. Because I agree with him. It was cool to be a part of a game like that. It was cool to watch and cover and report and follow a game like that. A game that actually mattered. A game that had meaning. A game between two good teams, who each sort of wants to assert itself as the top of the ACC. And Jeff Capel is not thinking about being on top of the conference. Brad Brownell is not thinking about being on top of the conference. And I think they both went to great lengths to make sure their players and teams didn't think about being on top of the conference. But they all want to be on top of the conference. Pitt knows that Clemson has been one of the better teams in the conference so far. Clemson knows that Pitt has been one of the better teams in the conference so far. And when you see that, and you see, when Pitt sees what Clemson has done and Clemson sees what Pitt has done, you get a little fired up to play each other. You start looking at that as, I don't know if you would call it a resume builder, but certainly a game that you're going to chalk up as a good win. Especially for Clemson going on the road. I feel like, Clemson walked out of there feeling like we really did something here today. We really did something. Going on the road into this building with that crowd and that energy and beating that team. And so I ask again, when was the last time somebody said that about Pitt? When was the last time somebody said that about beating Pitt? It's been a long time. And I think I almost think it's been so long that since we've seen this kind of situation, that we sort of forget that when you reach a certain level of being good, a level that I think Pitt is very much flirting with right now, when you reach that level and the games start taking on meaning and you're playing a good team and you're a good team playing a good team, the games are probably going to be close. They're going to be battles, and you're probably going to lose some of them. And it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. It doesn't mean the end of the season. It doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means that you're a good team, they're a good team, and on that night, they were a little better. And because we haven't been around that in a long time, because we haven't seen that in a long time, we haven't experienced it, I think we can kind of forget just what it's like to actually be in it. And right now, Pitt is in it. And they got a stretch coming up here that's not going to be easy. Duke on Wednesday. Well, Duke on Wednesday is not going to be easy. Then they have Georgia Tech, Louisville, Florida State, which quite frankly is a stretch where, even though Georgia Tech and Louisville are on the road, Florida State's at home, I mean, Pitt should go 3-0 in that stretch. This Duke game is going to be really interesting. Duke is beatable. Duke is very much beatable. Pitt has beaten better Duke teams than this. They beat a better Duke team a couple years ago than this one this year. But it's on the road at Cameron. What would it mean for Jeff Capel to get a win at Cameron? That would be something. If they can win this game and then sweep the next three, which they should. They should win at Georgia Tech, they should win at Louisville, and they should beat Florida State. That's going to put them at 8-1 to start the ACC. But even if they lose to Duke and they win the next three and they start 7-2 in conference play, and they'll be 14-6 overall. I mean, that's pretty good. Still have 11 games to play. You're definitely flirting with 20 wins at that point. And so, and I don't think I haven't really seen a lot of people jumping off the bridge about this game, which I admire. I commend. I think it's very clear the issues that Pitt had in this game. I think it's clear where they lost it, when they lost it. And I feel like there were things they did that were sort of uncharacteristic. The offense going into the hole that it went into, not just in the final 5.5 minutes, although that's a big part of it, but also just not getting anything inside the arc in the first half. It was atypical for what we've seen out of this team through the first 15 games. And so I think, or at least, the last 12 or so of those 15 or 11 or so of those 15 games. So I'm willing to think that it was an off night. I'm willing to think that it was just a night where they faced a good team and they just happened to come out on the losing end. Fully expecting them to get back into the habit of winning and playing like they have been all season. They're going to need more from Nelly Cummings. I don't think there's any question about that. Cummings finished with 3 of 11 from the floor, had 8 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 turnover, 1 block, 1 steal. Not a great game for him. Played 31 minutes, sat for about 6 minutes in the second half. He had a stretch in the Virginia game in the first half where he sat 6 or 8 minutes. I asked Jeff Capel after that game what was going on there, and he said that Cummings had been sick for a while, and so it was kind of tied to that. I wonder if his 6-minute absence, I think it was about 6 minutes that he sat out in the second half. Let's see. He came out the 9:54 mark. I don't even know if he sat out for 6 minutes, to be honest. He might have only sat about 4 minutes or so. 4 minutes in which they ended up building their biggest lead of the second half, the 8-point lead. I don't know if he was maybe still dealing with some of that, if he's still slowed. Nelly Cummings has been a net positive this season, and I sound like I'm damning with fan praise, and I'm not. I think he got off to a slow start, even by his own admission he did. But he, I think, has been really good for this team. I'm not worried about Nelly Cummings. Jamarius Burton continued to play really well, 9 of 16 from the floor, 28 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. I mean, he's everything this team needs right now in terms of a leader. And Cummings has been for the most part too. Blake Hinson, not an efficient shooting night, 4 of 11 from the floor, but he gets 14 points and 6 rebounds. Greg Elliott hits a couple threes, 3 of them actually, and scores 11. And I tell you what, and this was something I talked about last week, I think, and I know I wrote about it after the game on Tuesday, the Virginia game, that I said they needed something more from the bench. They needed to get more out of the depth. Until John Hughley comes back, they're going to need someone else to step up at center and play well. and they probably could use another wing guard type to give some to eat some minutes from those guys, to give those guys, the Burton, Cummings, Elliott, Sabandi group just a little bit more rest to try and keep their legs a little bit fresher. And they ended up getting, I think, some big performances in those two spots. Nate Santos and Guillermo Diaz-Graham both played about 12 minutes. Diaz-Graham had 4 points and 5 rebounds. 4 of his 5 rebounds were offensive rebounds. He also, there was somebody else. Oh, he had 2 steals. He had an assist and no turnovers. Santos scored 2 points on that buzzer beater at the end of the half, 1 of 5 from the floor. But I actually thought most of his shots, we were joking after the game that like the worst shot he took was the one that went down. It was the one he made at the buzzer. All of his other shots, the 4 he missed, were actually pretty good shots, including 3 of them from outside the arc. So he only scored 2 points, but he had 5 rebounds. He had that was 1 foul. Oh, and no turnovers. And plus minus, not a great stat. I think it leaves something to be desired when we're talking about basketball. But Guillermo Diaz-Graham is plus 10 in that game. Nate Santos is a plus 15. Pitt made big strides when those guys were on the court. And they really played some of the best minutes I think they've played for Pitt all season, and for Santos for his whole career in that game on Saturday. If you can get that kind of performance from Nate Santos, and I think those shots are going to start falling if he keeps taking good shots like that, if you can get that kind of performance from Nate Santos and continued progress and development from Guillermo Diaz-Graham, particularly while John Hughley continues to be out, then that's a boost. I mean, you're still going to win your games with Burton, Hinson, Cummings, Sabandi, Elliott. Those guys are going to be the guys who win the games for you. But they can't play 40 minutes. And when they're not in there, you're going to need guys like Nate Santos, who pops up on the screen conveniently, and Guillermo Diaz-Graham to step in and give some quality minutes. And you need to not have a giant fall off when they're on the court. Plus 15 when Nate Santos is on the court. Say what you will about plus minus. Plus 15. I mean, they didn't lose the game because Nate Santos was on the court. They didn't lose the game when Nate Santos was on the court. Guillermo Diaz-Graham being a plus 10, they didn't lose the game when Guillermo Diaz-Graham was on the court. They might not necessarily have won the game. I mean, obviously they didn't win the game, they lost. But you don't want to. I mean, you want to be able to count on those guys to not blow the game. You want to be able to put them in with confidence, so that you can use them to rest your starters, so your top guys are ready to close the game out. And if Santos comes in and gives minutes for Blake Hinson or one of the guards, that should keep them fresher and give you a better chance at the end of the game when you need to make a bucket in the final 5.5 minutes, which, I mean, Pitt didn't. They didn't get the baskets they needed late in the game. But it's one loss, and they move on. They're going to keep playing meaningful games. And this one on Wednesday night is going to be another meaningful game. And they very well might not win it. They're probably favored to lose. I haven't seen what a betting line is, but you're playing at Duke. You're probably going to be, plus something. And they very well may lose that. But then they have a great opportunity with Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Florida State to rattle off 3 wins in a row and be right back on top of this thing 7-2 in the conference. Be a great spot to be heading into the halfway point of the ACC schedule. So still a lot to like about this team. I don't think there's much to be discouraged about. I mean, newsflash, if they only make 3 baskets in the final 5.5 minutes or 5 baskets in the final 10 minutes, they're probably going to lose. They're going to be in a tough spot. There's no surprise there. This team has shown that they're not necessarily, prone to doing that very often. As a matter of fact, it's on the contrary. They're pretty good at falling behind, engineering a comeback, and then closing it out, finishing. On Saturday, they fell behind by 10 in the first half, engineered the comeback. They just couldn't finish. They did it against Virginia. They did it against North Carolina. Couldn't quite do it in this one. So we'll see. My advice for Wednesday night, don't fall behind by 10 in the first half. Keep it a little bit closer so you don't have to engineer quite the comeback. So that if you go on a scoring run, it gives you a lead as opposed to just getting back to tied. But that's just my advice. I don't know anything about basketball. So, all right, it was that was the big event over the weekend. There's more things to talk about, and that's why we have a Morning Pitt every day. We'll be back tomorrow morning to talk about Marquez Williams and his decision. We'll see if Pitt's newest transfer has announced his commitment by the time we go live, or not go live, by the time we post the Tuesday Morning Pitt. Hopefully that'll be out there, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of things to talk about. We always have something to talk about when it comes to Pitt here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And don't forget, we will be live on Wednesday night after the game to talk about Pitt Duke. Win or lose, we'll talk about it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So lock it in, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, turn on the alerts, notifications. You'll never miss any of our live streams or our exclusive Pitt video content like these Morning Pitt videos. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate it. Hope you had a great weekend. Even if you didn't like the outcome of the game on Saturday, I'm sure you probably enjoyed the experience of being there, because as Jeff Capel said, it was pretty cool. But hope you had a great weekend. Hope your week gets off to a great start today on Monday. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.